We finished today this short message series at the start of the school year, which for most churches, even ours, kind of marks the kickoff of a lot of programs, events, focuses, so forth. If you're our guest and you've been with us the last couple of weeks, this is a good time to have been here because you are hearing what matters most to us. And effectively, you're hearing our commitment to care about these things more than we're going to care about really anything else. Now, for all of us who call RiverTree home, however, this has a very important purpose as well. I have mentioned at the front end of each of the three messages in this series that you have to understand that even in churches like this, full of very good-hearted, committed Christian people, it takes 3 months for your commitment to your core values, to your mission as a church, to begin to drift. If you don't revisit them, if you don't remember them. And so we are pausing to remember what we say matters most to us. And that is the commitment to be real and to be rooted, and what we will talk about today, to be reaching. We talked about being a real church the first week, and if you remember, I told you I think the safest way to define that word is not to let our culture do it, because it's a bit of a buzzword. It's a bit of a cliche in our culture today. Biblically, there is a word that actually means that very thing, though in your normally in your New Testament, you would find it translated sincere or genuine. But it means real. And all the time when your New Testament, the part of your Bible that is Jesus and after Jesus, all the time when it uses the word real, it's about these spiritual or moral qualities that should find a way to be lived out in the real world. In any church, like ours or any, that would claim to be a real church has to be about these very important spiritual qualities. But they can't be fake. They can't simply be words. We have to work and work and work at finding a way to be those things in a broken, messed up, difficult world. Last week we talked about rooted. And rooted is all about spiritual depth. That we, like that river tree, will sink our roots deeply into God so that no matter what the circumstances might be, we will not be affected. And this takes work. This, too, is not an easy word. All too often, people can show up to church or they can claim to be a Christian, but all in the end they are is a fan of Jesus. They aren't really committed to following Jesus, to being like Jesus, to living like Jesus. And so what we want is a church full of people who are not fans of Jesus. We want a church full of people who are rooted, which also means you know how to follow Jesus and connect with Jesus day in and day out, week in and week out. And this week, we talk about reaching. Let's return to these life verses of our church, and let's start today by looking at the last phrase in those verses. So God wants his people, all who believe in him, to be like this kind of tree that has deep roots, that endures, whose leaves always stay green, and they never stop producing fruit. Very common biblical expression. If you've been in church at all, I'm going to guess at some point you've heard somebody like me talking about this concept of fruit. Well, what on earth does that mean? Well, again, if you've been around the church block once or twice, maybe your mind runs to several passages in your New Testament, Jesus and after Jesus. Because Jesus talks about fruit. For instance, in Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 to 20, he talks about people as two different kinds of trees. There are good people and bad people, and you know them because they produce good fruit and bad fruit. Okay? Jesus also speaking, John chapter 15, beginning in verse 1, says that we are like vines, and we should produce fruit on those vines. And God will work and sometimes even prune our lives so that we become more effective in producing fruit. Maybe most famously, the Apostle Paul, who founded most of the churches after Jesus, writes in Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 to 23, that there are fruits of our more human or base nature, and it's all kinds of bad stuff that you'd call sin. And then there's fruit of the Spirit, like peace, love, joy, self-control, etc. Okay, but here's the problem. All that stuff is 600 years after this. Jeremiah wrote Jeremiah 17 in 600 BC. So what do you think Jeremiah meant? Well, it's probably congruent with what Jesus and Paul did, but let's look in the Old Testament for how the Old Testament uses that expression of fruit. First time you find the idea of a life bearing fruit is in what's called the wisdom books of the Old Testament, collected and written sometime around 1000 BC. Most of the time you find it in this book called Proverbs, collected and written by King Solomon, sometime around 800 BC. Look at these Proverbs and just begin to, in your mind, sort through what the expression fruit means when you encounter it in the Holy Scriptures. For instance, Proverbs chapter 8, verse 19. Wisdom's fruit is better than fine gold. What it yields surpasses choice silver. So apparently, if you're a wise person, what happens to you because you're wise is better than any amount of money you could ever receive. Okay? Proverbs chapter 11, verse 30. The fruit of those who are righteous, that is, who do things God's way and are just and are right in what they do, is a tree of life. And the one who is wise saves lives. So if you are a righteous person, very churchy word, I know, but if you're a just person, a moral person, if you're someone who does things God's way, apparently those choices have the effect of being a tree of life to everybody around you. In fact, second half of that verse, you actually save people. You rescue people through the effect of what you choose. And then this is actually where you find the expression most in Proverbs. Here's only one verse, but you could find about half a dozen like it. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. The tongue, that is your speech, your tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. So apparently, your words, how you choose to speak, have an effect. And you cannot understate the effect because he says it's the power of life and death itself. And if you use your words wisely, it will have an extraordinary positive effect on you and others. Here's Isaiah 32, verses 16 to 19. I underlined the word. This is when God comes back and restores his people who were far off from him, and Isaiah says of that day that the fruit of that righteousness will be peace. Its effect will be quietness and confidence forever. God's people will live in peaceful dwelling places and secure homes in an undisturbed place of rest. So apparently when God comes into a life and he works in a life and he begins to change you and you begin to live more congruent with what he says and what he wants, what begins to happen, the consequence of that is that you'll see peace. You'll see tranquility or serenity or quietness and confidence. Last one. This is a small prophet, somebody that pretty easy to miss in the Old Testament, named Hosea. Hosea writes in Hosea chapter 10, again, look at the expression. Hosea wrote, by the way, right around the same time as Jeremiah. plant righteousness, there's that churchy word again, plant righteousness for yourselves, and then what will happen? Harvest the fruit of unfailing love. Break up your unplowed ground, for it is time to seek the Lord until he comes and showers you with his righteousness. But if you've planted wickedness, look at the next expression. If you've planted wickedness, you will reap evil, because you have eaten the fruit of deception. Again, it seems like the values we have, the behaviors we enact, the words we use, the choices we make, good or bad, have an effect. And that effect is called fruit. So if you wanted to summarize what you just saw, how would you do it? Perhaps like this. In terms of our church's life verses, in terms of what the whole Bible says about fruit, in Bible speak, we'd say that the fruit of your life is the consequences of the spiritual choices, the moral choices, the words you use, the priorities you have in life, all those things, the consequences of them, good or bad, is the fruit of your life. It's what your life produces, and it has a tremendous effect on other people and yourself. And if you doubt the positive effect it can have, I lifted in that last paragraph things directly from Proverbs, Isaiah, and Hosea. If you live God's way and you try to do things his way, you try to have his values, you try to obey what he said, what will begin to happen, not just in your life, but in the life around you, is peace, tranquility, confidence, unfailing love, and on and on and on goes the list. So let me summarize that even more succinctly for you. When you think about your life and you think about bearing fruit, like Jeremiah 17:8 says, you can ask yourself two questions. How does my life taste to other people? Or, is my life delicious to other people? And, is my life nutritious to other people? Is my life delicious to other people? Is my life nutritious to other people? That's what having a fruitful life is all about, biblically. How's it taste? And how nutritious is it for other people? Now think through those two questions. How does it taste? When you are with somebody, when they leave you, what is the lingering effect that you have on them? That's the taste of your life. When you hang up the phone after a phone conversation, after you're done Facebook messaging somebody, that is the taste of your life, the lingering effect of it. What is the taste of your life? How conscious are you that your life has a taste at all? You are not oatmeal. You are not that bland. No. All life has taste. All life has fruit. Is it good or is it bad? Is it an apple plucked from the tree, just washed off, crisp and sweet? Or is it that mealy apple that's been sitting in your fruit bowl for a week and a half that you tried to pawn off on the kids for breakfast in the morning, and they're smarter than you, they wouldn't do it? How does your life taste? Because every life tastes good or bad. Every life has positive or negative consequences. And second question, how nutritious is your life to other people? That's what the Bible means by fruit. So, How are you taking you and giving it away for the benefit of others? That's what nutrition is, right? You wolf down the bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios in the morning, and the Cheerios get no benefit from that. They do not magically reappear in the box, right? I don't know that you get a lot of benefit from it either, but in theory, the nutritional benefit of your overflowing bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios in the morning is for you. It's not the Cheerios, it's for you. And apparently one of the core ways to look at your life in this metaphor of fruit that binds the Bible together, you can find it from cover to cover, is you are supposed to think to yourself and evaluate for yourself, where am I being nutritious for others? It's got nothing to do with what I'm doing for me. It's got to do with how I am investing in and benefiting other people. How am I doing that? Am I doing that? How am I seeing myself take the best of who I am, what is unique about me, and doing that? You see that? If you're going to think about being fruitful, and you're going to think about that in a biblical way, you have to keep those two questions in mind. How am I being delicious for other people? How does my life taste? And am I being nutritious for other people? And at this point, you might be thinking, what does that have to do with outreach? I thought we were talking about reaching this morning. But we are. Maybe you've never thought about the connection between this idea of living a fruitful life as a human being for the sake of other people. You've never connected the dots between that and being a reaching kind of person who's a part of a reaching kind of church. Let me connect those dots for you. What we do as a church is we ask ourselves the question based on this idea of being fruitful. To whom do we give our spiritual fruit? Everybody here who calls this church home asks that question, if not directly, implicitly. To whom will my life be tasty? To whom will my life be nutritious or beneficial? In whom will I invest? Who am I trying to influence positively? Who am I trying to encourage and uplift and support? You see that? Who is it going to be? And the answer in a reaching kind of church is not the people sitting here. That's the key. Not the people sitting here. Let me tell you some stark things about the American church in the year 2011. After a person becomes a Christian person, so they've lived most of their life and they're not a Christian person, and lo and behold, somewhere in the course of their 5 decades of life, the Lord kind of grabs them by the scruff of the neck, gets their attention, and they give their life to Him. They become a follower of Jesus. And they start going to a place like this, called church. Do you know within 4 years of that person becoming a Christian, they will no longer have any significant friendships with a non-Christian person? Congratulations. We became like an inbred family in the Ozarks. Right? After 4 years, they no longer have any significant relationships with the people who were just like they were 4 years ago. Unbelievable. Only 10% of people like you and me who go to church week after week, month after month in America today, only 10% in the course of a year have had any conversation with somebody who is unchurched about anything that has to do with Christianity. Anything. That's 1 in 10. It only gets a little better when you ask, what's the percentage of churched people who have a fairly significant friendship with an unchurched person? How many churched people have that kind of relationship with an unchurched person? The answer is 19%. Unreal. You look at the typical church budget. You know what would stand out to you? 45% of the church budget is spent on staff, which means I got to be overpaid, right? 25% or more, depending on the size of the mortgage, is spent on your building. Well, okay, even for the people who aren't real good at math, that's 45 plus 25, that's 70, right? 70% of every church budget is spent on only those two things. Gets worse. Of the remaining 30%, you know how much is spent on reaching people who aren't sitting right here this morning in the typical church? 3%. $3, ladies and gentlemen. 3. Wow. My point to you is simply this. It is not to rag on the American church. It is to tell you that there's a problem. And the problem is we've lost sight of the fact that the church, as Billy Graham used to say, is the only organization in human history that exists for the benefit of its non-members. And to be a reaching church, we decide to remember that. The goal here is that we do church as simple as we can, requiring as little of your energy and time as possible to do things like Sunday morning, so that you have more of your time and more of your energy to spend it where we'd like you to, which is not on us. It's out around us. That's what we want you to do. In fact, if you think about it, there's not that much that's required for us to be a church and to function like a church. We have setup teams, we have the worship team, we have the sound guy and the computer guy, we have the cafe people every week, and that's kind of what's required. I suppose you kind of need me every so often, but that's debatable. And that's what it takes to do Sunday, week in and week out. Aside from Sunday morning, what do you need to be the church? You probably need to have a way to pray for each other and a way to support each other. You probably need to have a way that if someone's sick, you can provide for them and care for them. You need to have a way where your people gather together in smaller units. We call them groves, like small groups, and they're committed to that. But that's really it. This is not calculus. This is third grade math. It's not that hard. It's not that complicated. And yet, what do? We spend so much of our time and so much of our effort making what we do for each other better and better, bigger and bigger, and we forgot why we existed in the first place, which is for the benefit of our non-members. Where will you bear spiritual fruit in your life? Where will you be tasty for other people? Where will you be beneficial or nutritious for other people? The answer, if you call our church home, is, I want it to be out there. Every bit as much as it is in here. Out there. And this can start and needs to start very, very small. It is no more complicated than Jesus' second great commandment. You love your neighbor as yourself. The genius of that command is you don't have to look across the street. You don't have to look in another town. You just look for the people around you. Because I don't know the people around you. The person sitting next to you may not know the people around you in your life. Just start there. Who are the people around you? Perhaps physically in your neighborhood. Who lives around you? Who's around you at work? Those are the people that Jesus wants you to say, I will love them. With the best of who I am, with what's good about me and unique about me, I will love them as much as I love myself. They are the people that I will target with the spiritual fruit of my life. They are the people around whom I will behave in a tasty and delicious way. They are the people that I will want to benefit from my life. I will try to be nutritious for them. It's them. It is no more complex than that. Start by looking around you. If you call RiverTree home, you know there's a lot of things that we do, though, to reach out as a church collectively. Do you know how we make those decisions? It's never to replace the loving your neighbor as yourself principle. We decide what to do as a church based upon one really simple idea. What do we have to do together because we can't do it alone? And there's lots of stuff that we can do better together than we can alone. We can have a better impact, for instance, on kids at Vanguard if not only one of us does it, but we have a director who leads 10 of us who do it, and hopefully more. Many of the things we do down at Byron Center Village, in the heart of Byron Center, we couldn't do alone, but we can do them together. And that's what drives how we decide about reaching. But it never replaces what you do individually. You see that? Before we break up into some discussion groups, I want to end today with someone who I think in the last 50 years understood this idea of how one life, one Christian life, is supposed to affect those around you, is supposed to be beneficial and tasty to those around you, maybe more than anybody else I've read. It's Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa wrote, Mother Teresa, I can't imagine that I have to explain who that person is to anybody. That's the person who gave her life in service to the poorest of the poor and to the destitute in Calcutta, India. These are some of the things that Mother Teresa wrote about this loving your neighbor as yourself focus. One life upon one life. Investing the best of who we are in them. Trying to be tasty and nutritious to that one person around you. See if this doesn't encapsulate everything that we've been talking about this morning. Mother Teresa writes in her journals, do not think that love, in order to be genuine, has to be extraordinary. What we need is love without getting tired. Be faithful in small things, because it is in them that your strength lies. I imagine she told herself that time and again when she was lifting one more leper, one more drunk, just one more life out of the gutters of Calcutta. Elsewhere in her journal, she writes, let no one ever come to you without leaving better and happier. Be the living expression of God's kindness. Kindness in your face, kindness in your eyes, kindness in your smile. Every time you smile at someone, it is an action of love, a gift to that person, a beautiful thing. I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters, and it will create many ripples. Never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest you. I am a little pencil in the hand of a writing God, and I am his love letter to the world. Do me a favor. What we're going to do, like last week, is we're going to talk a little bit as a church family about this third R in our church's life. If you're our guest today, you are more than welcome to not participate, and you can go have some coffee and visit the welcome carts. and we'll dismiss in a little while. But if you're willing, what I would suggest that you do is join in one of the discussion groups and just identify yourself as a guest, because you're going to have a window right now into who our church really is, not who I or anybody else says it is. And I think you will get a great picture of what bands us together as a church family. So would you stand up, and I want you to find the people who are your friends, or maybe the people who are in your small group with you, and would you get with them, and then I'm going to put up some discussion questions for you.